right. With that, I think we're ready to get on with our first speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. He's going to talk about weed management and citrus production strategies for improving efficacy, increased safety, and sustainability. Dr. Remus Kanissary with the University of Florida, Southwest Florida Research and Education Center, Assistant Professor of Weed Science. And his presentation is very important because if you're up here in Georgia, I know that getting information on weed control and citrus is very hard to get. I've never seen a presentation in Georgia on weed control and citrus. We've gotten some information from Florida through the fruit production guide, things like that, but haven't seen anyone actually in Georgia talking about it. So we're very pleased to have Dr. Kanissary here with us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to him and let him get rolling. We get recorded.
Did you hit it?
Yeah.
Okay, it is
Okay,
recorded.
we did it.
Great. Huh? What am I at? There you go.
All right. Thank you, Jake, for that introduction. Usually I get the introduction, this is the guy who kills plants for a living. It's much better than that. Thank you. So I'm Ramdas Kanissary, Southwest Florida. So I'm going to talk about some of the weeds, how importance of weed management, how we can do that in citrus. So how to advance it? Okay, so this is how I have organized my talk. So I'm going to talk about a brief overview of weed management. Then I will talk about the toolbox that we have available for weed management in citrus, some of the do's and don'ts, some of the tips that I'll share while going through those tools or strategies in the toolbox, if time permits, before I summarize the talk. Okay, so now let's see why weed management is important when it comes to citrus. Of course, we want to keep weeds in check because we want to make sure whatever we are providing to the citrus should be available for our trees. Should not be, stole by any other plants or weeds or something like that. So basically, to reduce the competition with the trees and improve yield and productivity. I'm going to show you an example data here. This is a study we have done recently, and we found. If you look at the graph, let me set this graph for you. On the y-axis, we have an average harvest weight of citrus for trees, and we have two levels of weed control. On the x-axis, we have a weedy plot, we have weedy, and we have a weed-free or a weed-managed plot where we have about 75% of the weeds are controlled. And you can see, if you have a clean plot, you can at least get 25% increase in the yield. So keeping the weeds clean in your citrus orchards or grow can really pay off. There will be a significant increase in the yield. Not only that, there can be other additional benefits as well. If you have a clean or weed-free citrus orchard, it can actually potentially help in pest and disease management. For example, we did a study recently. We screened several weeds that's popularly seen in Southwest Florida in citrus on their impacts or on their effects on supporting pests and diseases. For example, we use a psyllage as the model for this study, and we found that some of the commonly found weeds like Spanish needle, dog fennel, and primrose in the citrus grove or in the perimeter areas, in the ditch banks and things like that, they can act as a way station for the psyllage. But you can see here, when there is an insecticidal spray happening in the citrus grove, the psyllids can fly and go to some of these weeds and stay there for some time, a few hours, and they then come back to the citrus trees when the effect is gone. So they can act as a temporary way station for pest and pest and diseases as well. So in a nutshell, it's very important to manage the weeds in your grow. So in Florida, we spend about, if you look at the production cost, we spend about 12 to 15% of the total production cost in weed management. And for this, we have a toolbox. I'm saying toolbox because it's just literally like a toolbox. There are several tools or strategies in that toolbox. So you pick the right tool for the right weed situation, for the right location and season, and utilize it for an effective weed management. So I'm gonna go through each of these tools that we have. Toolbox. Okay, for example, prevention. You need to prevent before problem starts, right? So field sanitation is an example of prevention utilizing weed seed-free equipment and things like that. That's a very basic concept. Also, utilizing landscape fabric or mulching or composting. This strategy, preventing the weeds. For example, there is an emerging practice of utilizing mulch as well as compost in citrus trees in Florida. So this is an example of mulch spread in a citrus tree row. And something I want to point out here is if you apply mulch or compost, never spread it very close to the tree trunk. This may result in excess moisture buildup and it can harbor more insect and pest and disease problems. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. And also, if you use compost, we have to make sure we get the compost from a certified provider, because this is an example of a weed. This is a compost pile, and you can see the weeds are already emerging there. So we have to make sure that otherwise you're introducing the compost and you may be introducing a whole suite of new weeds into your grove. Now let's move to the next tool, the mechanical. An example would be mowing. And you all know we mow, especially when you have some vegetation in the row middles, the areas between the rows, we do mowing. So something I want to bring to your attention is make sure you move it, grasses or broadleaf weeds in the row middle, mow them before they go to seeding. Once they start seeding, and when you start mowing it, you're actually spreading the weeds to the other parts of the farm as well. So this is something we need to keep in mind. I didn't list the tillage here, although it's a mechanical practice. When you till, especially to control weeds in your established citrus grove, it can potentially hurt the roots. So I wouldn't suggest tillage. Maybe as a pre-planting operation it works, but once the plants are in, once the trees are in, tillage may not be a good idea. But mowing works. So what I want to focus on today is chemical, utilizing herbicides, chemical weed control. We all know it is widely accepted, it's the most popular, it's cheap, and it's most cost effective. So first let's talk about how we can weeds are going to emerge, from time to time in your citrus tree rows, in your orchard. Sometimes it will be like popular weeds or common weeds like Spanish needle or at least evening primrose like this. But sometimes new weeds start to pop up. For example, in this picture, I'm showing a Pennsylvania cudweed decided to show up in one season in one of the stores. You never see that in Florida, but with all the major storm events and rainfall and things like that, this guy started showing up. And so one thing I want to point here, whatever it is, if it's a common weed or a new weed, timely control is very important. We have to make sure we bring in a weed management program, whether it is chemical or non-chemical, in an early stage to make sure it is not becoming a problem into that season or the upcoming seasons. So for this, we have a great tool in our toolbox that's post-emergent herbicides. Those are herbicides that is applied to the foliage, to the emerged weeds to manage them. So I just don't want to give you different types of products, post-emergent products to you, but I just want to touch base with some examples. Most of these are, I believe, labeled in Georgia. They are labeled in Florida, but I believe they are labeled in Georgia as well. If not, you have to check the specific product label for those type of restrictions. But these are some of the examples. They are non-selective herbicides, post-emergent herbicides, meaning they can manage broadleaf as well as grasses, no matter what. So we have carbendazole, paraquat, their brand names are there, glyphosate, you're all familiar with that. Landmaster is a combination of glyphosate and 2,4-D for broadleaf control. So I just want to bring in some pointers here. For example, paraquat or gramoxone is a much popular material for it's a contact herbicide. If you want a quick kill, you apply paraquat and you can see the effect in 6 hours, probably days, a day or something like that. The quick kill, but you have to be mindful about paraquat that's in the pipeline already with EPA, like new, you have to take a new, test and things like that. So just be mindful about that. But that's a non-selective herbicides. But I want to bring in another tools here, which are very important. Selective herbicide, especially when you have a specific weed problem, you can bring in this tool. They works perfect. For example, saflofinacil, the trade name Trevix, is a broadleaf killer. They works excellent if you have heavy pressure of Spanish nettles or parsley, ragweed or ragweed parthenium. So make sure common ragweed and ragweed parthenium are different actually, or they look alike without a flower, but once the flowers started coming out, they are different. I mean, look at the ragweed always produce a green colored flower, whereas the ragweed parthenium, it's a pretty tough weed actually. Ragweed parthenium, they're not responding. They have a very slow paraquat or glyphosate application. So you have to go with something like Trevix here. They also known as white top, white colored flower. Then goatweed or nightshades, all the broadleaf weeds. If you see that pressure, use Trevix at 1 ounce per acre, and it should do the job. Likewise, we have some excellent specific gas killers as well. Materials include fluacifop or sethoxide and fusilade and postplus are the trade names. Excellent for controlling guinea grass, Bermuda grass, Johnson grass. So we always see this type of situations from time to time. You have a Johnson grass or guinea grass growing neck to your citrus tree, right? You cannot spray it directly because it's gonna glyphosate may not be so effective in this case. A glyphosate, if you try to spray glyphosate, you may be hitting the citrus tree and there will be like needle-shaped leaves and all those phytotoxicity coming up. So here you can utilize spot spraying, fusilade or post plus to control the guinea grasses or other grasses that grow in connected trees. So one more thing, weed identification is very important. For example, you may have come across dayflower here, and you may thought this is a broadleaf weed because it's the shape of the leaves. But one thing we have to keep in mind, it's a grass family. It's a monocot, but even though it's a monocot, grass killers will not work on dayflower. The best product, in my opinion, if you have dayflower, is carfenrazone or AIM or a Landmaster. It's a combination of glyphosate and 2,4-D. So these are some of the tips I want to bring to the table to improve efficacy of post-emergent herbicides. For example, adequate coverage is a big factor here, especially when you're using paraquat or gramoxone. They don't move in the weeds. They are contact herbicides, so you have to make sure you add. You need to get a good spray coverage. I would always ask my growers to use a optimum spray volume, not too small, not too high, but something along the lines of 20 to 40 gallons per acre, with a happy medium of 30 gallons per acre. That should do the job. And another thing, using a surfactant is very important, especially when you use contact type herbicide, like paraquat or AIM or something like that. This is a small piece of data I want to show you from our study, where we used paraquat alone and paraquat in combination with a non-ionic surfactant in all the weeds we tried, like pigweed, Spanish needle, or nutsedge. The presence of that NIS, non-ionic surfactant, some examples will be, LI 700 or something like that, that improved that control efficacy. So it's a 0.25, a little bit of adding a $1 or $2 per acre, but it can give a lot of, get the best out of that product. And not only using just a surfactant, you have to use the specific surfactant, and you have to consult label for that. For example, Trevix, the specific broadleaf killer I mentioned earlier, will not work with NIS. So it has to be mixed with a methylated seed oil. Similarly, the grass killers I mentioned earlier have to be mixed with crop oil concentrate to get the best out of it. So these minute things you get the best bang out of your products. Okay. Then you also adjuvants, for example, AMS, buffers, etc. Most herbicides tend to work in a pH of a mixing pH of 4 to 6. So in case your water is hard or high pH, especially when you use the glufosinate or glyphosate, you have to make sure you add buffer or AMS to bring down the pH to 4 to 6. Okay? So I want to add one more tool to this post-emergent toolbox. We recently got a label for glufosinate ammonium nitrate. It's an excellent product that can be a potential alternative to glyphosate. For example, if you look at this list, these are the non-selective herbicides. Pay attention to the last column, the mode of action grouping. And it is very important to bring in different mode of action into your weed management program. So we need to rotate the products. Don't use, for example, if you think about a weed management program in your citrus grow, don't use glyphosate over and over and over. 4 months, 3 months, you apply another glyphosate. Not the way to go. It's not only increase species. As a result, you will not get a good result. So once you use paraquat or glyphosate, rotate it with another mode of action like glyphosate or glufosinate, something like that, that can really reduce, help to reduce fight weed resistance and tolerance issues. Not only that, tank mixing products. It's also important. It's also good practice not only to rotate but to tank mix a couple of products in the tank. But when you tank mix, make sure you mix compatible materials. For example, never tank mix glyphosate with glufosinate or glyphosate with paraquat. It will not bring the best out of it. So, in a nutshell, when you use post-emergent herbicides, use your surfactants, get a good spray coverage, like 20 to 40 gallons per acre. Always spray when there is enough sunlight, low wind, and when the weeds are in active growth stage, early growth stage, get an effective post-emergent control. You see dead weeds, and the only weed that I like is a dead weed. Okay, so now talk about pre-emergence. Okay, so prevention is better than cure, as we say. But you're looking at a photo of a citrus tree row, which is very clean. This is what we want. Less competition here. Nothing is growing there. It's good. The same spot I photographed in about 30 days. This is from Southwest Florida. Look at that. The weeds are coming up. It's already flourished and thrived and taken over the street. So suppressing the weed germination is also very important and should be brought into the weed management program. And we have a lot of pre-emergent materials in our toolbox. These are some of our examples. Again, I don't want to give you all the names and everything, but I just want to show you the products available, probably labeled in some of them are labeled in Georgia as well. So some of the tips to get the best out of the pre-emergent or residual herbicide, make sure they're applied to the bare ground. So if you have an existing weed, you have to manage that with the post-emergent, then you apply the pre-emergent, then turn on irrigation. In many cases, to activate the pre-emergent herbicides. And again, always use a post-emergent tank mix partner. If for example, paraquat plus pre-emergent, then if you don't use the same again. Think about the rotation. Don't use the same post-emergent tank mix partner all the time. If you use a paraquat one season, rotate it with glyphosate, then glufosinate, and so on and so forth. So I want to show us a little bit of data about three herbicides, pre-emergent herbicides, Allium, Chateau, and Carmex, which is diuron. We looked at how the compatibility of glyphosate versus glufosinate, and we found when you mix glufosinate with this pre-emergent, it's equally or better than utilizing glyphosate. The point being here, you can actually utilize glufosinate as an alternative to glyphosate even in the time. Okay, then always use. I talked about rotation. In pre-emergent also, it's very important when you tank mix more than one product. For example, I want to show you a data of when we mix Allium or Chateau. Okay, so these are some of the combinations we use. You can see in the table there is Chateau alone, 2 levels like 6 ounce and 8 ounce. Then Indasiflame or Allium with 3 and 5, high level and low level. Then we mixed it, the flumioxazin and Indasiflame or Chateau and Allium. We mixed it at lower level and like a higher level. So this is 1 month data, weed control efficacy, everything looks good. All we got close to 100%, but when you go into 3 months, things started, some of the treatments started falling And at 5 months, you can see here the mix. When you had a lower mix of Chateau and Allium, it stayed pretty good. And this is some picture from it. The control, untreated control on the left, on the right, the mixture of indaciflam and flumioxazine did a very good job. So in this way, there may be some cost reduction. Instead of using a full rate of Allium is a pretty expensive herbicide. You can mix low rate of Allium with a low rate of Chateau. Two chemistries in the play, and it's a double whammy on the weed. So there are two chemistries. If one weed seed escaped a chemistry, there is another chemistry in the play. You can get the best out of this type of combination. So now, chemical weed control. It's a great tool, as I mentioned, but we have to be really cautious, especially to avoid pre-injury, which is very important, right? It matters. So we have to make sure maintain proper broom height, deliver the herbicide to target, avoid any cause, if it's pre or post, avoid tree foliage and fruit contact. So this is an example of a fruit contact of glyphosate with citrus. You can see the burn gonna fruit fall anyway. Then paraquat also. You can see the fruit as well as leaves. Even pre-emergent, when you apply to the soil, like diuron, it can be, or even sometimes it can be by the roots, as you can see on the right, root uptake injury. You see the symptoms on the top. But if it's a contact type injury or spray drift, you see the symptoms on the lower hanging branches. So, and you have to be really, really careful about new recess because there is a new planting and recess going on. So make sure we install protective wraps around the trunk of young citrus trees. This not only protect, freeze damage or things like that. This helps you prevent some of the contact of the herbicides with the young tree roots. And young tree roots and the stem are very susceptible to herbicide contact. And also make sure if your trees are less than 2 to 3 years of age, they are an establishment stage, then never use the full rate of herbicide. Always use high, the lower end of the allowed rate spectrum. And you can see a dieback. If you have a high herbicide content in the soil, then you can see your new resets or young plants start a dieback. If there is a suspected herbicide residues in the soil, make sure the soil is analyzed or do a biopsy before the reset because it's going to happen again if you don't determine the herbicide content in that soil. So we have to keep all this in mind when we have chemical weed control and always read product labels. Okay. Now I'm gonna talk about one more tool here, which is cultural, and it is utilizing cover crops. Very sustainable way. Similar practice in Florida. So if you're looking at the picture of some cover crops in between the row middles, we are trying to test this system in the row middle area. Okay. So this is a mix of cover crops planted in row middles. The cover crop has several benefits, not only in citrus. I mean, it's been a practice in several crop production systems, including vegetables. So basically, it helps improve the soil health and quality, then retain the soil from erosion, which is very important in our soil, sandy soils. Suppress weed growth, which I'm interested in, and improves the biodiversity. Cover crops are going to attract good insects, the friendly insects like the ladybug, beetle, and things like that. It's gonna, enemies of your pest and things like that. So let me talk about the weed growth. So what we found was some of the cover crops actually has this ability to signal the weeds that do not grow here. It's my territory. Do not grow here. They produce a chemical through the soil, through the roots, or through the air and say, don't come here. I'm taking care of here. So we did some studies, and this process is known as allelopathy. Okay, so we did some studies and you can see, I want to show some data here. So you can see the cover crops, the number of cover crops on the y-axis, on the x-axis, the number of weeds. So you see there's a negative correlation. There is more cover crops in that area, there is less and less weeds. So that negative correlation indicates that, yes, there is some type of allelopathy comes into play. So it's a great system going on. And I'm going to show you the picture, a video of how we plant cover crops. So this is how we seed. We usually do a mixture of cover crops, 2 or 3 mixture. We're planting it in the row middle, and maybe a couple of weeks, start a germinator, see, and then after 3 months, it's in full bloom. So this is a mixture of sun hemp, daikon radish, and ryegrass, and see, So this is a picture from the non-cover crop area on the left side. You can see all type of nasty weeds there. There is guinea grass, which talked about the black nightshade, geranium. But on the left, the same area experiment with cover crop. Just the daikon selling the weeds from here. So it's a great system going on. If you want something sustainable, control, among other benefits, weed management is great for cover crops. Last, actually, this is a system we are trying. We are doing some research in Florida, thermal, to steam for weed management in citrus. What we did was we bought a steam boiler which can generate steam from water, and we connected a boom, like a herbicide boom, to it with some modifications. We used all the steam compatible piping and things like that. So this is the whole system. There is an electric generator, there's the flow meter, the water tank. It's just water. Water will be pumped into the boiler, it will be converted into steam, and steam will be channeled to a boom. This whole system can be, pulled by a tractor. We found that this is some initial results, but it's a great system, non-chemical way to control some of the weeds like sedges, goatweed, and guinea grass. So this is how we apply the steam onto the undertree area. Okay, steam is coming up. It's like a closed system because we have to make sure the plants or the weeds get exposed to steam for few high pressure steam for at least 2 seconds. Just like our skin, when we expose our skin to steam, you get scorched, right? Likewise, when the weed tissues are exposed to steam, they will burst and they will form a contact herbicide like action. The area after steam application. See, 6 hours after steam application, you can see something like this. Just like applying paraquat. The same, you have an untreated control in the foreground, then steam applied in the background. So you can see the difference here. So right now we are also looking at how we can apply steam onto the ditch banks and things like that because we don't want to apply many chemicals into the ditch bank. So this is steam application there, the area in about 2 days. So the kill is just like a contact herbicide here. So some of the pros of utilizing these techniques are reducing chemical footprint, an option for conventional and a great option for organic production. But there are some, I have to acknowledge there are some caveats. Cons here, there's potential weed growth happening here because if you try to manage nut sedge, it will only give a top kill. You're going to see some emergence after that from the application, and this is slower application process. With herbicide, you can do the tractor. You can drive about 4 to 5 miles per hour, but with steam to get that type of exposure, it's only 1.5 miles per hour. Process and things like that. So there is pros and there is cons, but it can be a workable system, but we need some more data to make sure it can be applied to production systems. So those are all the tools. One more strategy I want to bring here is combining. I told you, right? Pick the right tools. Sometimes we have to pick more than one tool. For example, integrated weed management. I'll tell you an example. For mixing mechanical and chemical strategies here. For example, we always see vine weeds everywhere in our citrus. This is an example of a citrus tree heavily infested with vine. This is a milkweed vine or sometimes balsam vine. If you try to spray herbicides, you cannot do that without killing the tree. If you try to, try to get it out of the ground, pull it, the roots will be still there. It's going to come back. So we have a strategy which is known as integrated. We are using two tools here. Your mechanical, where you cut it. Just cut, leave a stump, and spray the stump with 2 to 3% glyphosate. So that way, the glyphosate will move to the root and kill the root. You don't have to pull it out. And since you cut it, you may or may not untangle it and take it out of the tree. If it's not much, you can leave it like that. It will die by starvation. So this is a great way. This is a working way that we can control many vine weeds in Georgia and Florida. Don't try to pull it. Don't spray. Just cut it. It's not a cut and spray. Cut it. Leave it stump. Spray the stump with a systemic herbicide like glyphosate. That's all I got. So we talked about weed control toolbox, mulching, mowing. Make sure we have a timely post-emergent spray. And there are certain tips we can bring in, like spray volume, surfactants to get the most out of your products. There are new post-emergent options I talked to you about, like glufosinate. Then there are pre-herbicides. Pre-emergent herbicides with a whole suite of that. Tang mixing. Pre-emergence is a strategy like allium and stato mixture. And then we talked about cover cropping and steaming. And whatever you do, make sure these are safe. We need an accurate and safe application. New planting care. This is my team. They do all the work. I just present, and I have to, I have to thank my collaborators, Grover, as well as the faculty collaborators. And this is a picture of a weed garden we have established with the help of Dr. Morgan at our center. So one thing we noticed or we learned was weeds thrive out in the wild, but when you try to grow it in a pot, it doesn't want to grow. And also we get to weed the weed garden as well. So, and we have a lot of information from IFAS extension in terms of weed management. This is an example. This is an excellent quick reference guide to post-emergent herbicides. It's available online. You can print it out, put it in your truck. Gives you all the information on some of the products you will be using for post-emergent weed control. That's all I got. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or time, I'll take it. The glyphosate. Oh, sorry. So I'm repeating the question. So the question was why I mentioned that do not mix glyphosate with paraquat or glufosinate. Why? So this is the reason. So glyphosate works by moving. It's a translocated herbicide or systemic herbicide. So once it's absorbed by the foliage, it has to move through the plant to the roots to kill it. But paraquat, on the other hand, it will kill the tissues that comes in contact with it. So if you have glyphosate and paraquat in it, paraquat at once kills the tissues and prevents the movement of glyphosate. So basically, it's not synergetic; it's antagonistic effect. So you may not get the best out of both. Same thing. Glyphosate is also kills tissues that comes in contact. But on the other hand, you can mix glyphosate with Trevix. Both are systemic herbicides. So both a move, they will not kill the tissues that comes in contact. So if one herbicide hinders the movement and activity of other herbicide, they may not bring the best out of each other. Yes, that's fine. Then you can see needle shaped leaves. If you see some symptoms, something got into the material has got into the. And if it's not that bad, the plant is gonna take care of itself. It's gonna come out of it, depending on the question. I'll stick around and we can chat more. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, great question, Jake. So Jake was asking, I talked about again the time mixing of pre-emergent herbicides. So what would be the timeline like that, right? So yeah, typically when you mix it, in our studies, we observed a good control for 4 months, depending on the time. Maybe in summer, the weed pressure is high. So you may see probably 2.5, 3 months, 3 to 4 months, I would say. So what we do, then we'll come back with one more application. So typically we do in a year, we do two of those combination premix combination that should take care of pretty much most of your wheat problems, and maybe one a maintenance spray in between, like cleanup spray, to make sure the weeds are out of the way and the soil is clean for your pre-emergent weeds. Yeah, you can rotate. I mean, you have to. So one thing is, one thing we need to keep in mind is do not use the same thing over and over. So I would say mixing kind of help there. It's kind of analogous to rotating because you have two materials in there. So you're not letting the weeds to adapt to a material, right? At the same time, it would be beneficial to try another combo. Like for example, allium. One example I would say, we mix allium and chateau. You apply that, and after that, probably 3 to 4 months, we would apply a chat and diuron instead, not the allium and chat, things like that. But combination really helps, and it's really beneficial than using the same mode of action again. Sure. Mhm. Yeah, I would. This is something I found out in my observation. If you're trying to set up your land for a new planting, I wouldn't use residual herbicide. I would go with the post-emergent herbicide, predominantly glyphosate or paraquat, because if you try to apply residual herbicide, highly likely it's going to stay in the. With residual herbicide or pre-emergent are designed to stay in the soil to kill the weed seeds. So it can stay in the soil, and if you have your baby plantings going in, can suck up from the soil. So I wouldn't. I would stay away from the pre-emergent for the first couple of years of new planting. I will go with the post-emergent only. Then once the plant transition into a 3 year and gets established, then we can go with we can bring in the post-emergent into the program. I'm sorry, pre-emergent into the program. Uh, even if we are going with pre, it would be the very the lower rate, actually, depending on the label restrictions. But as a part of the if there is an opportunity, part of the land